We've always been transparent on the number of nursing home deaths that were reported in the facility. We've always said those are the in-facility deaths. And we've also said that there have been hospital deaths. Back in August, we said that we would get the legislature the number, and we were working on that, particularly in anticipation of my budget hearing, which is coming up next month. But when I saw the Attorney General report, decided that we need to finish that up quickly and get these numbers out in real time. The other key point, and this is a very important point to emphasize, is that the total number of deaths does not change. That number has not changed, and we put that out. And to misrepresent that number actually is factually inaccurate. And so in the report, when I saw that that was there, I said that when they said there was undercounting, that's just factually inaccurate. We wanted to get that out. And Governor, as you have said on all of these presentations, reporting the number of deaths is always the hardest number to report out there, and we wanted to be sure that those numbers were accurate. Thank you.
Yeah, if I just also remember the context here. The report affirmed everything the commissioner said. Where this starts is frankly, a political attack from prior federal administration, HHS, their great spokesperson, Michael Caputo, who's Roger Stone protege, who said, we had more nursing home deaths in New York because of something that the state health department did. This report affirms everything the commissioner said for the past year. The State Department of Health followed federal guidance by CMS and CDC. Commissioner said no not-for-profit nursing home was forced to take anyone. Report confirms that. If they took a person who they could not care for, a COVID-positive person, they violated the law. The report says that. And the Department of Health only counted the number of deaths in hospitals and the number of deaths in nursing homes. Released that number stays the same. Well, how about people who were transferred from a hospital back to a nursing home? That number, the department was correlating, because you have to get that from the nursing homes. And the report also says the information from nursing homes is often incorrect. And that's the number to date, but it's an ongoing process. The report affirmed everything the commissioner said. Where this starts is frankly a political attack from prior federal administration, HHS, their great spokesperson, Michael Caputo, who's Roger Stone protege, who said, we had more nursing home deaths in New York because of something that the state health department did. This report affirms everything the commissioner said for the past year. The State Department of Health followed federal guidance by CMS and CDC. Commissioner said no not-for-profit nursing home was forced to take anyone. Report confirms that. If they took a person who they could not care for, a COVID-positive person, they violated the law. The report says that. And the Department of Health only counted the number of deaths in hospitals and the number of deaths in nursing homes. Released that number stays the same. Well, how about people who were transferred from a hospital back to a nursing home? That number, the department was correlating, because you have to get that from the nursing homes. And the report also says the information from nursing homes is often incorrect. And that's the number to date, but it's an ongoing process.
Over 1 million people applied for unemployment insurance last week, and that's far more than in the worst week of the Great Recession. And economists agree that if there's not more help, Many more people will lose their small businesses, the roofs over their heads, and the ability to feed their families. And we need to help those people before the virus is brought under control. The President's American Rescue Plan will help millions of people make it to the other side of this pandemic. And it will also make some smart investments to get our economy back on track. I want to emphasize the President is absolutely right. The price of doing nothing is much higher than the price of doing something, and doing something big. We need to act now, and the benefits of acting now and acting big will far outweigh the costs in the long run.
So now the
I am the Senate.
So we have some good news, nominally some good news, but I'll give you the specifics here and you can determine for yourself what you think of it. Biden to sign executive order requiring federal government to buy American. So when I first saw these headlines, I was over the moon excited because this is something that is genuinely populist. The idea of buying American. What it's supposed to be is it's a mandate for the federal government to only purchase products that are made in America. And the federal government buys a lot of stuff. So that would be a big, boon to manufacturing in this country, which is something I care deeply about. And, I think most leftists care deeply about is like bringing a lot of good, high-paying jobs back to this country. And, particularly in manufacturing, that would be a wonderful thing to have like good union jobs in manufacturing in America. So this is something I care deeply about. Trump campaigned on the idea that he was going to do Buy America stuff, but it was all a front. It was all a facade because he signed Buy American executive orders, but he ended up just signing symbolic Buy America executive orders. Like one of the things he did was a Buy America week. So like the White House was showcasing products made in America and they like showed them off for a week and we're all supposed to clap and say, "Oh yes, you're so great for reinvigorating manufacturing in the United States." He didn't do that. In fact, under Trump, there was a net loss of factory jobs. In the first year, there were over 100,000 jobs that were outsourced. So, he was a fake populist. He didn't actually do these things. So now Biden comes along. I was reading the headlines, I read a bunch of the articles, and it looked to me like he was signing the executive order that I wanted him to sign. But there was one article in particular that went into a little more of the specifics and the details, and of course, it's not as good as I had hoped it was. Basically what this executive order does, it increases the price preference for American goods. So nominally, that should lead to more American products being bought by the federal government. But the other thing it does is it changes how domestic content is measured. So it's the amount of a product that must be made in the U.S. for it to qualify as made in the U.S. Now, the thing is, the rules that we had under Obama, under Trump, it's nominally you need stuff to be made in America, but there was a big loophole where we said, that includes all of our allies. So if you're an ally to the U.S., like Israel, for example, if they make something in Israel, we count that as made in America. Or at the very least, like, I don't know every detail of it, but like, let's say the product is made in Israel, but it's like assembled in the U.S. or something. They would say, oh, that counts as made in America, even though it was made in Israel. So there are these giant loopholes. So what Biden is doing is he's making the loopholes a little less egregious. But the devil is in the details, and we don't have all the specifics, but even the article I read that has the most specifics, it really just says that this executive order increases the price preference for American goods, and it changes how the content is measured and the amount of the product that needs to be made in the U.S. for it to be considered made in America. So, but we don't know because we don't have the exact numbers. What would count as made in America and what wouldn't. But if I was a betting man, I would bet on the fact that this is not going to be nearly as aggressive as I want it to be. It's not going to be an actual rule that says the federal government can only buy made in America if it's really made in America. I don't think it's going to be that. It's just going to be like tweaking what's acceptable and making it a little bit better so that a little more of the stuff is made in America. You know what I mean? So it's good, and I want to give credit, but as always, the devil is in the details on these things, and you have to be careful. Because we're going to get to another story about another executive order he signed, and the headlines are all brilliant, but then you read the specifics and the devil's in the details, and it's actually not that good of an executive order. It's like a baby step in the right direction, but, you know. No, you moved an inch in the right direction and you still got 100 yards in front of you. It's like, should I really give you that much credit? I don't know. So listen, I'm rooting for Biden. I want him to do the right things. I want him to be the next FDR when it comes to the economy. So like, I'm looking for it, man. And I want to come out here and say he did a great thing, full stop. But like this Buy American executive order, it's a little Weasley. And the same thing with the, what was the other one? The raising the minimum wage for federal contractors. If you read it carefully, every headline was like, Biden begins the process of raising the minimum wage for federal contractors. And it's like, why does it say process? Why doesn't it say Biden raises the minimum wage for federal contractors? What are you talking about a process? Because I remember when Obama signed that executive order, if I remember correctly, he just raised it for federal contractors. Now we're talking about a process. He begins the process by which you raise it. That reads to me like they're looking for ways to weasel out of it. You know what I mean? And this is the same thing. It's better than Trump. It's better than Trump, right? Because he's going a little further than Trump did, but it's not what we want it to be. It's still like weaselly, and there are still pretty big loopholes. So again, we'll wait until we see the specifics of it. But, you know, this is Buy American, and it's just inching in the right direction, and he should go a hell of a lot further. I'm looking for a real populist to come in and say, no, seriously, the federal government only buys American, and we mean that. No, we Weasley shit like it includes our allies. No Weasley shit like, oh, it only has to be assembled here. No, we're going to build here. And guess what? If we currently don't have the infrastructure to make the shit here, well, then that's the next thing I'm going to do, is help create the infrastructure to make the shit here. So NBC News is reporting something that I think people will be happy about. Just in, House and Senate Democrats introduced legislation to raise the federal minimum wage from $7.25 an hour to $15 by 2025. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to point out is what everybody else is pointing out, which is 2025, really? Now, understand, guys, usually with bills like this, there's always a phase-in period. That's not unique. That's common. There's always a phase-in period for stuff like this. But do I agree with the criticism that the phase-in is too long? Yeah, I do. I think that 2025 is, I mean, that's literally years in the future. I mean, maybe you could squeeze that timeline to like 2 years to get it to $15 an hour, and I'd be like, okay, I see, because there is a benefit to doing it gradually versus a blunt all-at-once thing. But yeah, 2025 that's a long way off. So I agree with the criticism that that's too long of a timeline. They should have crunched that a little bit. Now, the other thing people are pointing to is they chained this to median wage growth. Now, my first thought was, oh, well, that's a bullshit way of weaseling out of having regular raises attached to it. But it turns out my gut reaction was incorrect, because when you do the math on it, you find out that chaining it to median wage growth actually is even a little bit better than chaining it to inflation. See, because that's what I would have originally thought was the right way to go. You do a $15 an hour minimum wage, a living wage, and then you chain it to inflation so that it always remains a living wage. I thought chaining it to median wage growth is a problem because that doesn't grow as much as inflation, but I was wrong because the numbers show it's actually a little bit better than chaining it to inflation. So that's a good thing. It's a good thing that they're chaining it to median wage growth. Now you could say, hey, chaining it to inflation might be more consistent over an extended period of time where you get better regular raises. That might be true. So maybe the way to do it is to go with inflation, which is the original idea that I liked. But suffice to say that at least in terms of roughly how it works out, it's almost like you are chaining it to inflation by chaining it to median wage growth. Okay, so one of the criticisms I think is legit. They should crunch that timeline more. The other criticism, which I had, turns out it's just incorrect when you do the numbers on it, when you do the math on it. So listen, I mean, this is good. This is good. Now the question becomes the process behind it. So I don't know. An increase in the minimum wage is part of the $1.9 trillion COVID relief package that they brought up last week. So I don't know exactly the mechanics of what's going on here. They're sort of throwing a bunch of things at the wall, and I guess they're seeing what sticks. But you're not going to get this through with 60 votes. In a world that made sense, you actually would, because it's an 80% issue in the country. You're not going to get this through with 60 votes through regular order. So again, you'd need reconciliation to get it through, 51 votes. And there appears to be a little bit of a battle behind the scenes as to whether or not they're actually going to do it through reconciliation. Bernie is doing everything he can to get it through reconciliation. He's saying if we can't get it through regular order, we better do it through reconciliation ASAP. In fact, he's talking with the Congressional Budget Office, and they crunch the numbers on stuff like this. And he's trying to make the case that, listen, this thing is a giant win for the economy, because when you raise the minimum wage, what happens is, one of the consequences of that is people end up getting off of other government programs, because people right now work for starvation wages, and then they need to run to the government to get SNAP food stamps in order to survive. So if you raise the minimum wage, a lot of people will be off of food stamps, because now they make enough money on their own to afford the food. So Bernie's been making the case behind the scenes that this actually reduces the welfare state when you raise the wage, because now you're just making it so corporations pick up more of the bill than the government does. So he's arguing that behind the scenes. He's saying, for sure, we're going to put this through reconciliation if it doesn't get through regular order. And now I just learned before I came on air, the number 2 Democrat in the Senate said the same thing. Said, yes, we'll do it through reconciliation if need be. So now the question becomes, okay, it looks like they're going to do it through reconciliation. They better do it through reconciliation. But are they going to do just this through reconciliation? Or are they going to pair it with other things? Now, the benefit of doing just this is giant wins in terms of marketing, where you could slam the Republicans all day long and say, we are the ones who raised wages. Look, we did it. We did it in a standalone bill. A standalone bill. So that's the upside of it. The downside of doing it through reconciliation is you only get 3 shots of reconciliation per year, and to do just this as opposed to a package means you're sort of limiting the amount of progressive change that you can get through. So I don't know. I don't know which is the right way. All I know is they fucking better get it through reconciliation, because I still fear a little bit at that last moment the Democrats will do a classic Democratic move and say, oh gosh golly, I don't think we can get it through reconciliation, because maybe it's just not the right thing to get through reconciliation, and maybe it doesn't meet the rules very much, so maybe we should not try to get it through reconciliation, and we should just lay down in a chalk outline of ourselves. The Republicans, you know what they got through reconciliation? Their giant tax cut for corporations and the rich, which added about $2 trillion to the deficit. So they put whatever the hell they wanted through reconciliation. The Democrats are like debating, maybe not, get an increase in the minimum wage through reconciliation. They better do it, man. I'm leaning towards they probably will do it, but I still fear at the last minute they're going to bitch out. So we'll see, but listen, this is good. And, you know, I mean, I hope they'll change it to crunch that timeline a little bit. 2025 is a long way off, but we're close, man. We're getting close. Like, we might have some very, very tangible wins very soon.
Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is fired up about President Joe Biden's climate agenda. After comparing it to the Green New Deal earlier in the week, she's now saying this. Take a look.
I'm feeling extraordinarily encouraged, and I think that the significance of President Biden's executive orders communicates a lot. One is that it really communicates that he meant what he said on the campaign trail, that he would make climate change a central priority of his administration, and that he considers it not just a national security threat, but frankly, the global matter that it is. But it also really signifies a good faith openness and relationship to those activist communities that you had mentioned.
And Senator Bernie Sanders is on board as well. He thinks Biden's climate executive orders are, quote, very good news. Katie, I'm wondering, just from a political standpoint, if it isn't good news for Biden to have, AOC, Bernie on board as he begins negotiations, not only with Republicans, but with centrist Democrats like Joe Manchin, Kristen Sinema? Isn't that a good starting point for the incoming president?
Well, it's good for him in the sense that the far left is happy with him, and therefore they're not making a lot of noise. But when it comes to this climate change policy, which kills American union jobs, I think people like Joe Manchin in West Virginia would have some questions and problems with the climate change agenda. It's interesting that Joe Biden ran as a moderate, and now all of a sudden AOC is praising this Green New Deal plan as something that Biden supports, when Joe Biden continuously said on the campaign trail that he doesn't support the Green New Deal, although he does support some kind of climate change legislation or executive orders. Well, now we know that his vice president, Kamala Harris, who co-sponsored the Green New Deal with AOC, is getting exactly what they want when it comes to this overwhelming takeover of the federal government in terms of climate change and going after every aspect of Americans' lives because you can justify it by saying it's environmentally friendly.
All right, so Greg, let's talk about jobs. Katie was just mentioning it, and I was looking at the numbers. Bank of America's outlook 5% growth in 2021. Goldman Sachs says unemployment will drop in 2021. Moody's is even saying we may have full unemployment in this country by 2021 with Biden's climate change and stimulus package. How do you understand this?
I don't. I don't buy it. Look, I don't have to buy it. America was sold a bill of goods, right? I mean, Biden was supposed to be this benign, middle-of-the-road creature, but we knew, and we talked about this on the 5, that he's an empty vessel for the left. That's why they didn't mind him being nominated, and why Bernie was actually okay with it. Remember we were talking about the coming civil war inside the Democratic Party? It's over, all right? Basically, Joe Biden is Wile E. Coyote after Bugs Bunny meets him with the steamroller. He is flattened. He's not even trying to stand up for the average American because he can't. He doesn't have the energy. He's feeble and he's tired. He is perfect for the hard left. He's not in control of this. And everybody, he doesn't even know what these executive orders are. Let's be serious. Sad. It's actually sad.
All right. So, Jesse, the other big news, I mentioned this yesterday, is GM, iconic car maker, says they're not going to make any more gas cars by 2035. Isn't that another signal that, gee, I think that things are changing and you got to get on the cutting edge of innovation here? And that's what Biden's doing.
Yeah, I don't believe it. All those companies say that. They're just looking for handouts from the feds. Juan, Joe just joined the squad. I mean, this guy, there's no daylight between Sleepy and AOC. Or I should say, job-killing Joe, as he's known. Maybe that's why AOC likes him so much. Remember what you did to Amazon in New York City? Cost us all those jobs? Well, Joe just cost us about 11,000 with the key.
Represent
In the squad. I mean, cost us all those jobs? Well, Joe just cost us about 11,000 with the Keystone. AOC's like, oh yeah, that's the kind of guy we're looking for. Come over here and join us in the squad while we just destroy union jobs, Juan. And then what was it, 5,000 jobs building the border wall? Bye. Fracking bans on federal lands, that's another couple 100,000 jobs right there. Couple 100,000 people lost their shirts in that trade against those hedge fund thieves. Biden just walked away into Marine One and said, see you later. He doesn't care, Juan. He's injecting vaccines into KSM and Gitmo, while my parents can't even get stuck in the arm. I mean, what is, I mean, I mean, what are we doing here, Juan?
I'm telling you, it's a puzzle, Jesse. Jillian, I'm
Put it
I'm
together.
taken by the fact that Janet Yellen was in the White House today meeting with President Biden, and their message was the big risk is not doing enough. The big risk is doing too little, not doing enough,
yeah.
and they need to be bold on all fronts. What did you take away from that meeting?
It's the 2008 housing collapse playbook, and they're putting it into action now. I wish them the best. We obviously hope it works. A quick note on AOC. She's saying she's encouraged by Joe Biden's climate executive orders because he's fulfilling campaign commitments. But keep in mind that Joe Biden was completely written off by progressives during the primaries. They said he's too old, he's too white, he's too embedded in the establishment to make the kind of progressive change that we want to see in this country. But right now, where we are 2 weeks in, if you look at the 40 executive actions he's taken, progressives are very, very happy with it. That's what Greg was talking about.
But we begin with lawmakers continuing to fear for their safety as ongoing security threats at the U.S. Capitol continue to surface. D.C. police arrested a 71-year-old West Virginia man near the Capitol yesterday with a gun, 20 rounds of ammunition, and stop the steal paperwork in his car. Court documents show that Dennis Westover allegedly told police that he was, quote, concerned about the honesty and integrity of the election. He was charged with carrying a gun without a license, possession of unregistered ammunition, and unlawful possession of a firearm, according to an incident report obtained by NBC News. Meanwhile, a bipartisan letter addressed to House leadership yesterday warns that they are easy, quote, targets as personal information, including their home addresses and event schedules, are are all public. They are asking for increased funds to this year's member representational allowance, citing that increased threat level. And the acting chief of the U.S. Capitol Police is calling for permanent fencing around the
Turn your gray to brown. Feeling you can no longer be found. Bye.